Hello. If you're only joining in now, I'm Reverend G, minister at the Unitarian Universalist Community Church. Our physical building is on Shaver Road in Portage. And thank you for joining us on this glorious, beautiful, beautiful morning. Most, if not many of you, know that I used to be a Unity minister. And so I would be traveling or I would just be meeting new people. And in conversation, it would come out that I was a Unity minister. And then they would say, oh, Unitarian. And I would say, no, Unity. It's different than Unitarian. Now, I am a Unitarian minister. And ironically, when I meet people and I tell them that I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, they say, oh, Unity. And I tell them, no, Unitarian Universalist. And when I was a Unity minister, I always thought that, wow, these Unitarians are doing a much better job of putting themselves out there. They must be a huge denomination. Everybody seems to know about them. And now that I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, I'm realizing it is not true. The truth actually is that both denominations are doing a poor job of putting themselves out there and of letting the community know that we are there. This is what we teach. This is where we stand. This is what we believe. This is what we are about. However, today I want to talk to you about the Unitarian Universalist history. And really, I have to give you a timeline because prior to 1961, there was no such thing as Unitarian Universalist. And from here on, I will be referring to it as UU. It's the shortened version, Unitarian Universalist. So prior to 1961, there was no such thing as Unitarian Universalist or UU. There was just U and U. There was Unitarian, and then there were Universalists. And let's talk a little bit about how UU came about. But to understand that, first we have to understand you and you. So let's go back in time. Both denominations have their roots in very early Christianity. And when I say very early Christianity, it is Christianity before Christianity was unified. This is the time shortly after the death of Jesus when little groups prop up all over Africa, the Middle East, and these little groups all have their own special flavor of Christianity. But what they think of themselves is they are followers of Jesus the Christ. And each little group has its own specific flavor. Some believe a little bit of this, some believe a little bit of that. And if you read the letters of the Apostle Paul to different congregations, he depicts these differences and says, wait, that particular flavor of yours is off color. Don't practice that anymore. That other flavor, I commend you. I commend you for that. And so he is trying to unify these little mushrooming communities, followers of Jesus the Christ. And he finds it difficult because he's a one-man show and he travels to all these congregations or communities, groups of people. But it takes a long time before he can repeat a visit to a faraway congregation. So he writes these letters. Anyway, there are groups that believe, and this is a huge shift, and I talked about that in one of my previous services, it was at Easter, that in that time between the death of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus, these Jews, because Jews are the primary followers of Jesus, go from monotheism to a polytheism, which they don't call polytheism because that would be too big a shift. But how do you really explain that God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the three, the Holy Trinity, if you have a biblical background, then you've heard about the Holy Trinity. How is that really not polytheism? It's a little bit of mental gymnastics. So there is a bishop called Arius, Arius, and he says, I see no evidence of this Trinitarianism. I see no evidence that Jesus is any more divine than any one of us. And so he denies the Trinitarianism aspect of Christianity. And in 325, when the Emperor Constantine adopts Christianity as the official religion of his entire empire. And he's doing this because he wants to unify his empire that is falling apart. And he's realizing that he needs something that people will come around to and unify around, and that has to be religion. Religion is the most powerful draw that human beings respond to. And he looks around, and it is Christianity that he picks. And so he pulls all these bishops together. This is called the Council of Nicaea in 325. And he says, okay, so we have these mushrooming little congregations. You have, in general, the same idea. There's this Jesus guy. You talk about God. Now, I want you to come up with a unified belief system. This is your time. Go for it. So these bishops go to work, and they each make a case for their belief system that they held at the time. Arius is one of them, and he speaks against the Trinitarianism, and he loses. However, you see that Unitarianism has its roots in that belief system, because when this movement, Arius's movement, goes pretty much underground, and eventually it resurfaces in Eastern Europe. There is the David Ferenc in Transylvania, of all places. He also holds these beliefs of Unitarianism. He says this Trinitarianism, I've read the Bible, and there's simply no real evidence for it. There's some talk about it, but no actual real strongly founded evidence that Jesus is God, that the Holy Spirit is God. So David Ferenc makes the case for the one God, just one God. And Jesus is a way shower, a teacher, definitely somebody who is special and realize his specialness. But we are, all of us, just as special as Jesus. However, we may not have realized it. And it is possible for him to read the Bible, because by now the printing press had been discovered, or had been created. So now they are printing Bibles, and there are these different translations are also showing up. But just a little side note, usually the overwhelming belief is that when the printing press came about in Gutenberg, and they started printing books, it's the Bible that was printed in largest numbers and distributed in largest numbers. But this is not true. In reality, the most largely distributed book or document is like, it's your kind of homemade witchcraft detector. This is how you detect a witch. And in fact, after the printing press is discovered and created, that's when the witch hunts really take off. because these booklets are very, very widely distributed and people read it, and now they're looking at each other and, oh, I recognize that must be a witch, that must be a witch. And these witch hunts then just mushroom as well. This is just a side note though. So in 1569 is when David Ferenc in Transylvania has a one-on-one with a Franciscan monk, and it's a debate, and it's largely attended, and David Ferenc wins this debate. So that's when the king, the ruler of Transylvania, King Sigmund John, takes on the Unitarian faith, and he says all of Transylvania is Unitarian. However, you can worship however you want, as long as you're not hurting someone else who worships otherwise. In 1571, the freedom of religion, of religious beliefs, is proclaimed for the first time in the world. It's huge. It's huge. And it is instigated by a Unitarian and implemented by a Unitarian. I do like that. I must say I like that a lot. So then eventually the king dies, and then a Catholic comes in, and poor David Ferenc ends up imprisoned in the belly of a terribly humid and cold castle, and he dies there because he's not willing to recount his faith. The next place where Unitarianism shows up is in Poland. And there is a teacher, there's a preacher called Socinus. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly because I pronounce it with my Hungarian brain. And there are a lot of different congregations throughout Poland, and this Socinus unites them all. So there are the United Unitarians in Poland, and in about 100 years, they are driven out of Poland completely. First, they go to the Netherlands and they establish themselves. Then they go to England and they establish themselves. And in England, they are relatively safe. And then from England, they make their way over to our shores, the United States. So that's, in a tiny nutshell, the European version of Unitarianism. But what about Universalism? Where are the roots of the So we have one U, but what about the other U? Well, Universalism actually goes back even farther than Unitarians. They go back to another bishop, Origen. And he is looking at the holy texts. So we're talking, the 2nd century. And he's looking at the holy texts, and he says, you know what? This notion of hell, I see no true evidence for it. I see a wrathful God, an angry God, some mean God stuff, but hell, yeah, I don't see any evidence of that. So he denies hell. Well, for that, guess what he catches? Hell. Because there are these other Christian little communities who very strongly believe in hell. And hell, in fact, is a much first shows up in Zoroastrianism. Zarathustra is the one, and he is before Christ, long before Christ. He's the one who speaks of hell and damnation and the terrible business of hell. So Christians just take it from there and introduce it into their teachings. Origen, however, says, yeah, I see no evidence of hell. I can't believe in it. So Universalists are the ones who also look at these holy scriptures, the Bible, and they say, we see a loving God. there was this um, Universalist preacher, and he said, "Okay, let me give you a picture. So, say you prepared this beautiful picnic, and you go and you spread your picnic, and then you see this group of people who are completely lost. They're famished, they're close to dying, and they're extremely hungry and desperate. What do you do?" So people would say, um, we'd share our picnic with them. He said, exactly. Of course, if you would share your picnic with them. Now, why would you want to believe that God would just look at them and say, yep, go perish? Why would you want to believe that that is God's primal instinct to let anyone perish when he is aware of somebody's plight? You see, because Calvinism, which had taken root in in Europe, um, believes in the teaching of predestination, theory of predestination. It's a weird one, and it is especially weird because, um, well, I first was ordained in a Calvinist church, and that was the belief system. And in fact, I had to take an oral exam while I was studying at the seminary, and I drew the topic of predestination. And silly me had an argument with the professor during my examination. It didn't go down well. I didn't win that one. Okay, in my mind I did, but my grade didn't reflect that. Anyway, the predestination says that God, sometime, the beginning of time, whenever, predestined a small number of people who would be saved, and all the rest would perish in hell. And there's nothing they can do about it. Also, the ones who were predestined for salvation, there's nothing they could do to lose that salvation. And the ones who were predestined for hell and eternal damnation, there's nothing they could do to avoid it. So, that's how you live your life, knowing that there's this thing hanging over your head and it can go either way. And chances are you'll end up in hell because you know that the ones who are predestined for salvation are fewer than the ones who are predestined for eternal damnation. So this preacher said, like, why would you believe that a loving God, that a God that is worth worshiping, that God's primal instinct would be to let anyone perish? No, that the primal instinct is to save everyone. So that there's a problem now, because saving everyone does away with hell. That does away with a lot of fear. So universalism now has found its ways to the shores of our continent. So has Unitarianism. And believe it or not, they are very powerful movements, very popular movements. In fact, in the 1800s, they are the largest religious movements in this country. President John Adams, who was a Unitarian, was convinced, he said it many times, he believed that the United States will be a Unitarian nation. Well, joke's on him. So Universalism is spreading in the US, and now Unitarianism is spreading also, and it all starts on the East Coast. And so they haven't yet established themselves as a unified movement, but there are those who look at their teachings who are also Christians. Everybody's considering themselves Christians. So the roots of both Unitarianism and Universalism are squarely in Christianity. Now there are these other Christians, however, who believe in Trinitarianism, who very much believe in the existence of hell, who are very much governed by fear. And so they call these people who believe as the Unitarians do and as the Universalists do, call them Unitarians. They call the Unitarians Unitarians. The Universalists call themselves Universalists because they believe in universal salvation. So a little mistake that I'm correcting. And then in, I'm going to say 1819, Channing, a very famous preacher, delivers a very famous sermon called Unitarian Christianity. And that is the first time when he claims the term Unitarian and describes this movement as, this is the Unitarian movement, this is what we believe in. And Unitarianism really then takes root. What also happens in 1805, this is very important as well. So there is Harvard, and there's the Harvard School of Divinity, and the dean retired, and they have to hire a new dean. And there is a tremendous struggle between conservatives and liberals. Unitarians were considered liberals because of their Unitarian beliefs, although they were still strongly, very, very strongly governed by the Bible and very Christian. But there is a fight between the liberals and the Unitarians, and whose candidate is going to become the dean, because Harvard School of Divinity is the most prominent theological school in the entire country. And so as Harvard goes, so goes the nation. And after a long struggle, a liberal, Henry Ware, was elected as the dean. So the conservatives, they just decided, that's it. We quit Harvard. We just pick up our toys and we leave. And they also wanted to take the church assets with them. Up till this point, all these people would attend the same churches, same buildings. So the Unitarians then sue the conservatives, and a judge rules in their favor. And so all the assets then remain with the Unitarians, which is why when you go to the East Coast and you see the oldest churches, they are the first Unitarian church of, the first Unitarian church of. So, you know, the church in the main square in the oldest towns, it's always Unitarian because all the buildings stayed with the Unitarians. So there is Channing, and he gives his very important sermon in 1819. And then a generation later, there's another group of thinkers who come along, and they are Unitarians. And I'm sure you heard of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Margaret Fuller. And so they also think about they think philosophically, they look at the Bible, but there's one more thing that is available to them, and this is world religion, documents of other world religions, such as Hinduism. So they start reading about Hinduism, and their mind blows. Wow, there's this depth of wisdom, of guidance, of beauty, of what tremendous thinking for humanity. And then they get exposed to Buddhism as well, and their minds are further blown. So they become their own new group, Unitarians till the end, but they form this group of who today we know as the Transcendentalists. And so the things that they say are, the Bible is good, it's fine. However, there is a moral code that is written within every single human being. And call it conscience, call it whatever you may, but you don't really need the Bible to tell you what is right from wrong, because that is imprinted inside you. So each human being, therefore, should be allowed free will to choose their own path, because each human being knows what works best for them. There's no need to be governed by fear, by hell for sure, and human beings are naturally good, and there is this conscience that might be the mind of God, divine, might be divinely inspired, but it's within every single human being. So transcendentalism comes on, and Unitarianism is shaped by it tremendously. And out of transcendentalism, another very important offshoot grows, and this is very important. I can't emphasize it enough how important it is, because there are these people, they come to these churches, they commune with these people who are Unitarians, some transcendentalists, some not, and they're thinking like, they say that this conscience is divinely inspired, that it's maybe the spark of divinity. And we have been trying to develop this. Listen, we want to listen to God, to the guidance of this God. We want to hear it. And we can't. Like, regardless of what we do, we just can't. And yet, we do believe that we have a place in the world. We do believe that we are morally well grounded, that our conscience is good, that we are good people, and we should be able to be religious without having this relationship with God, or maybe, is there even a God? And so the humanist movement is born. And in fact, Unitarians very much embrace this humanist movement. So much so that it becomes an overwhelming flavor of Unitarianism. And they decide that their religion would be that of rationalism, that they would heed science, that they would stand for the underdog, that they will fight against slavery, the rights of women, for the rights of women. So they become very much involved in social justice. And Unitarians tend to be mostly humanists. Universalists are also very much present in the religious landscape of this country. And interestingly, their congregations are mostly in the countryside, and Unitarians tend to congregate. Their presence is more abundant in cities and towns. And they're both very powerful movements. A lot of followers, a lot of people. But then things happened. The First World War comes about. And people realize that maybe humans are not that good. Maybe that moral guidance is not quite so much there. And the evangelical movement takes off. And a lot of fear, a lot of hell. And those movements grow. And both the Unitarian and the Universalist movements begin shrinking. And they, of course, are very much, both of them make a conscious decision to not have a dogma, because they believe that human beings are perfectly capable to choose for themselves what to believe, how to live life. No church should dictate. Now, it doesn't mean you can believe anything you want. We have some principles. It doesn't mean that you can behave any way you want. We always say everybody is welcome. Every behavior, however, is not welcome among us. So Neither of them have a dogma. This is something they already have in common. Um, Neither of them believe in the existence of hell. Neither of them are governed by fear. So throughout the years, a few times they engaged the conversation of unifying, and the Universalists usually turn it down. But in 1961, so which is okay. All it means that, we've thought about it for a long time. And then in 1961, the decision is reached that Unitarians and Universalists should unite, and the UUA was formed, which is the Unitarian Universalist Association. And that is who we are today. We are liberal. Some of us believe in the existence of God, some of us don't. Some of us are humanists, some of us are not. Some of us are Christian, some of us are Hindus, Buddhists, agnostics. Everyone is welcomed here. Everyone has a home here. Every behavior is not welcomed. We are strongly governed by covenants. It's how we treat each other, how we live in relationship with each other. It matters. We agree to that. Then we have these principles that we have found to be true, and we also are very present to the fact that this movement is ever evolving, because we are a rational movement that heeds science and rationality. Therefore, in the light of new information, we are willing to change, we are willing to transform and to shift. Now, we are a significantly smaller movement than President John Adams predicted. As is Unity, who also has no fear to an eternal damnation, to encourage people to attend their churches. Otherwise, hell may become a reality for them. So neither of these movements have that. Instead, we believe that at the core we are all good. We don't need salvation. Some of us believe in God, some of us don't. It's okay. While our roots are squarely in Christianity, today, for a newcomer, that may not be so evident if they walk into our churches or listen to a talk now on Facebook or over Zoom or on YouTube. It may not be so evident that we have Christian roots. And personally, I believe that our message and our voice is perhaps more needed than ever. Universal love, struggle for social justice, equity for all, for creating a world that treats everyone and everything with utmost respect, compassion, kindness, and a care that assures that our little green blue earth, may have a future way into the ages. That we are people. We are truly the kinds of people who are willing to plant trees, knowing that we will never enjoy their shades. We're willing to think generations ahead and choose our actions so that generations ahead may live abundantly. we ought to do a much better job of defining ourselves, but most importantly, of putting ourselves out into the world so people would know who Unitarians are, who unity is, and they may have the possibility of choosing. So, be not afraid to claim yourself. Be not afraid to speak of what you believe in, of what you believe and how you wish to show up in this world, and how you are showing up in this world. And then speak of the beloved community that inspires you day by day, week by week, and supports you in unfolding, in manifesting your special way of being. And so it is.